All right, so this video shows how a print is being made. All right, and it has multiple colors on it.
With puppet maker David Bulb here again in our Saxa workshop in Tokyo, but not in my usual place for these videos. I'm here tonight up on the third floor at one of the printing benches. Now, this is not my printing bench, of course. I don't have one of those these days. This belongs to Natsuki Suga. And as you just saw in the cold open, this is the place where she made her version of the most recent print in our Japan Journey series, the one representing Summer G-Fields. This will be a process video. We're going to watch along from start to finish, from the blank sheet of paper to the finished print. As she reached each block in the sequence, she called Cameron San to come up from downstairs where his office is, bring his camera up, and take a video of each step. He did that, and he also took back the print from her in each stage and scanned it. So at the end of this video, we'll have one of those slideshows where you can see the colors magically appearing step by step. They've asked me to provide a commentary for this video, and that'll be my job tonight. I'm going to be taking a look at their finished rough cut, getting my headphones and microphone ready, and providing a play-by-play, as it were, of what you're about to see. Let's get right to it. Do you see the bright orange color of the pigment that she splashed onto the wood? Right away here with this first block, we're going to see a demonstration of one of the most fundamental aspects to the traditional Japanese method. That pigment was quite a vivid color, but these pigments are transparent, which means that they always allow everything below to show through. And in the case of this initial color, that will mean the tone of the paper. Just wait a moment until she's done here, and you will then see what I mean. Here we go. Off it comes. Our vivid orange has been diluted and mixed, as it were, with the light tone of the paper. Most of you who have seen many of our other process videos might be a bit surprised at the order here. Suga-san did the light background color before the key block. Surely the key has to come first, doesn't it? Well, it certainly has to come before any of the detailed coloring in order that we can confirm that everything is lining up. But if she had done this key first, the quite heavy pressure she used on that background color might have caused these dark lines to bleed a little bit. As you can see, there are very few places here where registration is tight, so she was able to do these two impressions in the wrong order.
All right, in my experience, the black is always done last. All right, you do the fine lines, be the last thing that you put on. I want you to look over here on the left side. There's the stack of papers that she's printing. And so that's an addition. I talked to you guys about an addition before.
Shapes on the wood here. This impression is going to be one that kills two birds, as it were. The upper part of the image, the part furthest from Suisan, will be an area of open sky in the picture. But the carved patterns on the lower part will turn out to be printing shadows. Shadows on the tea bushes and the human figures. Swim and you'll see the result.
So this might be an addition of 100, it might be an addition of 50, but they're going to make a series of prints to sell.
And presto, the two color blocks now have given us three colors. And this is all possible because of the transparency of the pigments. That clear liquid you saw her splashing onto the wood, which will be mixed together with the pigment, is starch paste. It's not there to act as a glue. We simply needed to thicken out the pigment mix, which would be too watery if left by itself. It's the combination of the two that gives us a creamy substance that gets pressed deeply into the fibers of the paper by our printing tool. And as you can see, sometimes almost coming right through to the reverse side of the paper. And it starts to come alive. Look at this. Remember, this green that you are seeing here is a combination of that latest impression, but it's on top of the initial one that toned the paper. Building color up in layers like this is a fundamental part of this Xinhanga genre.
I want you to look at the top and the left, upper left of this print. Do you see the little orange? There's an orange line in the orange and in the corner.
The metal object she is using is there to help keep the wood clean in the area of the registration marks. If she was a bit careless here, the corner of the finished print would be stained with this pigment.
So the registration tells her where to put the piece of paper so it is exactly where it needs to be. If that piece of paper is moved over a little bit, the color is going to go in the wrong spot. It is very precise to be able to coordinate these 10 colors that they're going to put down.
Can you see the result of this one? The main purpose of this block is the shadow tones in the clouds, but it also added a slight touch to the figures in the pathways. We've seen this green before, but we are getting it this time on only part of the tea fields in order to help us differentiate the closer and farther areas. little white slip of paper is simply there to ensure that even if the paper sags slightly while she is printing, it won't pick up any stains from the pigment. I think if we asked Susan about this, she would politely suggest that the block could have been carved a little bit deeper at that point. This one is a mistake. Not a mistake here in the printing, but it was a miscalculation in the color separation stages. This shadow on these trees appeared back at stage 3, and it looked fine then, but it turned out to be just too light. And we weren't able to dial it out back on the original block, because it would have made the sky too deep. So after a test printing, we discovered this problem. I just used a blank area on one of the blocks to cut the same shape again. It adds one extra printing impression to Susan's work, but you do what you have to do to get the job done.
I also think she's dressed in something different here, and you'll notice she's dressed in something different in another part of the video. If you're doing a big edition, yeah, here she is dressed in something different. So it takes multiple days to get through all of these. If you look at what she's doing for each of these colors, she might have to repeat that process 100 times or 50 times. But you think about, like, this takes a couple of minutes to print a color, and you add that with 100 pieces of paper, it takes a long time.
So what do you think? Looks finished? Well, it could be, I guess, but we have one more to do. It's a kind of a bridge to a more traditional ukiyo-e style.
This last thing that they do is quite special. And what they've done here is one of the things that separates ukiyo-e from other styles of printing. So that gradation from the dark blue to the
That's
light
it for
blue.
the actual printing part, but there are still a couple of other steps. For this series, we are using polymer plates to do embossing on the paper. The first one here, done with no pigment or paste, impresses the title of the print. Here reading, Summer Tea Fields. And the second one is a plate that she repeats for every print in this series, with the name of the carver, in this case, Young Jung-san, and the printer's name herself, Suga Natsuki.
All right, so now that you've watched how a print is made, what I want to impress on you is uh, um, so that when you begin to see these prints being shown in paintings, like a lot of times you'll see them in the background of a portrait or a background of when you look at the inside of a room and people have these pictures up on their walls in the room, you'll see Japanese prints. And now you know the process of that print and a little bit of the explanation of ukiyo-e. This is a list of artists that were influenced by Japanese culture, and it is not a comprehensive list. There's many more artists, but these are some of the big ones. You know, we'll be talking about Edgar Degas, Vincent van Gogh, and Claude Monet, Edward Manet. Let's see, Mary Cassatt is another one. We'll talk about Gauguin, Pissarro, Renoir. So lots of artists have been influenced by this style of art. And so in portraits in Europe, you know, like I said, Japanese culture is a very popular thing at the time. So people are beginning to dress Japanese and have their portraits painted. You can see the woman on the right looking at a Japanese print, and again, dressing like Japanese. And you can see the Japanese print in the background of both of these paintings. And then you can see the influence of Japanese art in European painting. This is Mary Cassatt. And if you look at the flatness of the image, so artists are now have permission to paint flatly. And that is a direct influence by Japanese prints. Artists are also beginning to paint with these bold patterns, and that is a direct influence by Japanese prints. And you can see, and artists talk about how they are looking at Japanese prints, and so you can see the similarities in the artworks. In this case, um, the idea of having things that are very close and then very far away is a Japanese idea that artists are beginning to include in their artworks. Having an asymmetrical composition is something that is influenced by Japan. And let me get to my notes on this one. So everybody recognizes this guy, right? In the painting where he cut off his ear, if you look at the background, you can see a Japanese print on the background. And then if you look at the painting on the right, Van Gogh wrote a lot about his interest in Japanese art, and he talks a lot about loving the culture of Japan. And so on the look at the painting on the right, this is something that he wrote about it. He said, "I had conceived this portrait as being that of a bonze. A bonze is a Japanese monk, a simple worshiper of the eternal Buddha." And he also wrote this about this painting. The head is modeled in light colored thick impasto against a light colored background with almost no shadows. But I've slanted the eyes in the Japanese manner. He changed the shape of his eyes in the painting to make him look more Japanese. So he is a very big fan of Japanese art at the time. If you look at his work before he starts collecting Japanese prints, it's very dark and muddled colors. And after he begins looking at Japanese prints, his colors brighten up considerably. Okay, we're going to jump into some more information. So we're going to talk about new technology. So let's talk about how artists used to make paint. I showed you videos on how artists made paint. I showed you how they made tempera paint. What material did they use to make tempera paint? Eggs, that's correct. And I showed you how they made oil paint, and I show you how they made fresco paint. All right. Was that a quick or a long process? It's a long process. If you want to come into the studio and you're in the mood to paint and then you have to make your paint before you start painting. That takes some of the fire out of your passion of being ready to paint. So, what is the new technology? And now that also means that you are stuck to your studio. You cannot paint outside because they need to have to take all of your materials to make paint outside, and that's quite impossible. So the new technology that I want you to know about is oil paint in metal tubes. And you can see in this photograph on the left, they started out by putting paint in these little bladders with these twist ties on them. And so you would open it up and you'd have the paint on the inside. And then they had paint in syringes. But the invention that broke the door wide open for artists was paint in metal tubes, like a tube of paint. I know, right? Yeah, but they're glass and they break, right? So, sure. I'll call up the art supply companies and suggest that. All right, now painters could escape the confines of the studio. Before, when artists made their own paints, they would only make a few colors at a time for what they needed in that moment. But now they had more colors at their disposal. This allowed them to be more experimental in their color choices. Colors in tubes were brighter than the colors that artists could make in the studio. And without colors in tubes, there would be no Cezanne, no Monet, no Pissarro, and no Impressionism, says Renoir. The tube of paint is a revolutionary invention in art. So this means that artists can now travel outside. And then they also had this clever device is that you can fold up an easel and have a little miniature studio right there. And you have little drawers that you can keep things. And look right there, there are tubes of paint that you can take out with you. And so I want you to know this term right here. It will definitely be showing up on the test. It's called en plein air. And that means painting outside. And we begin to see paintings of painters painting. So it's a painting within a painting, and that this is a thing that painters knew now do. Artists can now paint outside, and it gives a sense of honesty to the artwork. Artists are capturing the moment in life as it happens. Many started and finish a painting in the same session, which means they have to be very quick. And this also means that paintings cannot be polished or highly technical, simply capturing the moment of what was in front of them. Many started outside and finished the painting in the studio where they had more time. Here's a nice little studio on the boat. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about before we get to the art is the challenge to the status quo. Does everybody know what status quo means? Anybody confused by status quo? I had somebody in fifth period ask what status quo means. It means the current situation. It means the way things are, the way things have always been. All right, moving on. So impressionists become just like the realists and the romanticists before them. They became bored with history painting. They weren't really interested in history painting, mythology, or the lives of great men, and they didn't seek perfection in visual appearances. The Impressionists used looser brushwork and lighter colors than previous artists. They liked the ideas of the realists. The Impressionists aimed to be painters of the real. They aimed to extend the possible subjects of their paintings, and they concentrated on the world as they saw it. The French Impressionists disdained laborious academic sketches and tastefully muted paintings. They didn't like spending time in studios. So she says, we should go outside of our studios to paint the real world around us. And he says, but how? How do we take our supplies outside? How do we make paint outside? And that leads us to the tubes of paint and these portable painting studios. So you guys remember Edward Manet, and he painted Luncheon on the Grass and Olympia. And that was part of realism. But he was also just as famous for being an impressionist as well. And he would hang around other impressionists. So here he is painting, and he has his group of impressionist friends with him, a couple of whom that we are going to look into. But Manet was a rebel against the establishment. He was against the academy. And people would hang around Manet in his studio. Artists, writers, poets, musicians. All these people are flaneurs. I talked about flaneurs before. Those are rich people pretending to be poor. And they didn't have to work. They had nothing to do. And they were educated. So they would talk about ideas and discuss how to take art to the next level. Also, they didn't have to sell the art that they made. So this gave them the freedom to experiment with new ideas and try new things. So Manet was the rebel. So here are Manet and the other late 19th century French impressionists, and they say, we want to exhibit our art even though we don't follow your rules. And the salon says, your artwork is trash. We will never exhibit it. And so the salon agrees. So they create their own salon. I'll get to that in a minute. So the French Academy has a rule that your paintings are not allowed to look like paintings. For example, no brushworks. And Manet says lots of brushworks. So their solution to not being allowed to go into the salon is to make their own salons and to have independent galleries and independent exhibitions. So they don't have to do what the salon says that they have to do in order to get into the show. They can do their own thing. We got it? All right. So galleries explode all over Europe. And so instead of an art show once every year or two, now art is for sale all year long. No longer are they selling to the elites. Anybody could buy paintings now. Anybody could sell paintings now. And the new art buyers are the middle class. So now the middle class dictates the taste. Before, we had these giant works of art, even with realism and romanticism. We had these giant works of art, and now we have these smaller works of art with impressionism. The realists and the romanticists were making a statement about history painting, and that these paintings are meant to go in a museum or a mansion, where impressionism excuse me is small, and it's meant to go inside a middle class home. Also, the impressionists are painting outside, so their paintings have to be small in order to be able to carry them outside, paint quickly, finish it within a day, and bring it back inside. So they have to be small, and the subject is almost always a genre which fits the taste of the clients. And so we have the Salon of 1874, where the Impressionists create their own art society. And the salon is in a photo studio, and it is large enough with big enough windows. And this is a history making exhibit. It changed the course of art, and it is the birthplace of Impressionism. So, this particular event right here is very important because this is where the Impressionists really get their start. And with perfect timing for today, that will take us to the end of chapter 28, part 1. Do you know I need to go back and you good with that? All right. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we've covered so far? Anybody have any comments about anything that we've covered so far?